Welcome to the Open to Hope Show. I'm your host, Dr. Gloria Horsley, with my daughter and co-host,
Dr. Heidi Horsley.
Well, Heidi, we're going to be talking today about restoring balance and a family's journey beyond the trauma of loss. And we have got a great guest on today because she's been through terrific trauma, and her family is pretty amazing on this journey. So
Absolutely.
Would you like to introduce her?
Absolutely, Mom. Her name is Sharon Strauss, and I want to say one thing before we start. She did a phenomenal show with us and with Dr. Bessel van der Kolk. Mm-hmm. So if you Google Dr. Bessel van der Kolk and Sharon Strauss, you will see that show. So as you said, Mom, we're going to be talking about restoring balance, family journeys beyond the trauma of loss with Sharon. Hello, Sharon Strauss.
Hi.
Hi, Sharon.
It's so good to be here. I really feel so honored. Yeah.
So good to have you back with us. And Sharon is a board-certified and licensed clinical professional art therapist. She is the associate director for the Portland Institute and the author of Artful Grief, A Diary of Healing, written after the suicide of her 17-year-old daughter, Kristen. Sharon has an art therapy private practice and is the co-founder of the Kristen Rita Strauss Foundation. Welcome, Sharon.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me back again, too.
Yeah. Now, we've known you for a while.
Yes.
A long time.
A long time.
Yeah, a long time.
Yeah, through the grief and loss world and through ADAC, Association of Death Educators.
Mm-hmm.
And the Compassionate
And
Friends.
the Compassionate Friends.
And TAPS, Tragedy Assistance Program for Survivors.
Yeah.
All of those, our worlds have collided
Yes.
many, many times.
Absolutely, and Sharon has presented some fabulous art, which we will talk about later, and some ways to help you with your grief and loss. But first, tell people about your story.
So my story really began October 11th of 2001. That's when we got a phone call from the New York City Police Department letting us know that Kristen had died. She was a freshman at Parsons School of Design at 17, so she was almost 18, but, you know, young, coming up here to start her freshman year. And it was 1 month also after 9/11. So you remember what it was like in the city. You could feel the pull to the other side. I think you could feel the trauma, and she was very fragile. You know, we came to realize a lot of things after she died, and she went up to the 15th story of her dorm, the roof, and she died. And so that began our journey into that labyrinth of grief, into the trauma, into the whys, the hows, and finding one's way through, as you know, is very much of a lifelong journey. It's 24 years, and, you know, there are times when I think, did that happen? It did.
Yeah. Now, at the time, you had 2 other children, right? And
yes.
what ages were they?
So Kimberly, this is a long time ago, she was, I think, just 23, maybe a little bit younger. Kevin was a senior at the University of Pennsylvania when she died. And so
she was a youngest sister.
she was the youngest.
Yeah. And
yes.
is your husband's a psychologist then?
He is.
And then he was?
He was too.
And
yes.
what were you doing at that time?
I was an art therapist.
Yeah.
So I had really put aside a lot of my practice with raising the kids. So I thought, okay, I'm going to get back to it. You know, Kristen, we've launched her. She's in college now, and now will be my time to, you know, to reconnect with being an art therapist and to work. Well, little did I know that my life would turn upside down, and, you know, my journey, you know, in the field of art therapy was then very much shaped by her death, and, you know, with a focus now on grief and bereavement.
And you must have had a real strong connection with her because she was in the art world too, and I'm sure you were thrilled that she went to Parsons,
Yes.
which is one of the wonderful leading schools
she
here.
was an incredible artist.
Well, that's what I was going to say. To be 17 and to get into Parsons is no easy feat.
Yeah, she was very talented. From the time she was 5, you know, you could see there was something special about her. And so, you know, all these years later, to be, as an art therapist, giving back to the community of survivors through a creative process, it's almost like we're full circle, right?
Yeah. Yeah. So now my son was 17 when he died, same as yours, and further back, Heidi's brother. And he died in a car accident. Your daughter died by suicide.
Yeah.
What do you see differently? And by the way, at the time I was working in the field of grief and loss. I was a clinical nurse specialist in psychiatry, worked on in a surgical service. So like you and your husband,
Right.
I was in the field, and suddenly you have it happen
Right.
to you, and it's
Yeah.
like,
Right.
Wow.
You're then not a professional. You're a bereaved mom. You're a
Yeah.
bereaved, parent, and you have to find your way. But I think that suicide does offer very specific challenges in terms of shame. It's a shameful thing. It used to be that could you bury the person,
Hell yeah.
in a consecrated grave, maybe, clergy didn't want to, perform the kind of religious rituals that we've come across. Now that has definitely changed, but those are the kinds of concepts that people hold on to, and you don't want to talk about it, you don't want to ask, you don't want to bring it up. It has a lot of elements that are very difficult, and I think for parents, you look back and you go, what did I do? What
Right.
did I do wrong, in handling the ravages of what we came to understand as a bipolar illness that was very sudden and severe onset at the January of her senior year. So we really didn't have much time with it. And, it was also a commentary on how psychiatry evaluated her, and she was being treated for depression. And I have no doubt that she had a bipolar illness. And so, with that, there was a lot to work through that was very, very difficult. It makes it different from a parent that loses a child in an accident. Those are specific elements too, or a child who dies by cancer. Or
Did you think did you feel like you got support, or did you feel like people were trying to avoid you?
I think probably trying to avoid.
Okay.
I think it was very difficult. When you think 24 years back, that was really at the beginning of what we see now as a very deep and meaning-making, this is what grief and bereavement all is about, finding purpose and finding meaning. But back then, you heard people who were the peer counselors bringing up Elizabeth Kubler-Ross's modality and stages, and that was not helpful. And there really weren't the kinds of services back then.
No. I was a therapist and working there in the marriage and family clinic, also at the university, and I wanted all the girls, Heidi and Heather were at the Rebecca were at the University of Utah, and I wanted them to get some therapy. And it didn't even occur to me, you wouldn't even think about, make sure that you get somebody who specializes in grief and loss.
Right.
There wasn't such a person.
Right.
No.
Yes.
I mean, you just went to somebody and you went one time, right?
It was horrible.
Yeah.
I think he was horrified by the way that my brother had died, and that was something that I needed to process because it was a very traumatic, horrific accident where the car he was in burned and then blew up. So the trauma piece was what I was stuck in.
Right.
And I don't know if he could deal with it because he quickly changed the subject and said, we'll deal with that later. We need to talk about the day you were born.
Yeah.
I was like, what? I'm like, I don't even know how I'm going to get out of bed tomorrow.
Yeah.
I want to talk about the day I was born.
And Rebecca had the same experience. I don't know if it was the same therapist, and it was a recommended therapist, of course, and
Yeah.
Different world. But I'll have to say one thing. I felt guilt too. Parents feel guilt when their kid. We're
Should
supposed
I
to
have let
protect
him
our
down
kids.
out in that car that night?
Yeah.
Right.
Why?
Yes.
Why did I let him go?
Yeah,
You're supposed
of
to protect
course.
him and keep your kids safe. But
Well, and I think society can be quick to blame because they want to believe that they can, if I do things this way, nothing will ever happen in my
Yeah.
family.
Right. Right.
And unfortunately, we all know that that's not true.
right. Exactly.
If love could have kept our kids alive and, my sibling, they'd all be here.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, you look back and hindsight is wonderful,
Yeah.
but when you're moving through it and you take your child to, the best hospital, the best psychiatrist, you believe that they're the experts, they know what they're doing, and, you follow that, what else can you do
And
in
here
that
she is
moment?
at the best school
Yeah,
in the country,
exactly.
living her best life, and it's like
Right.
we're good.
Right.
She's in a good track right now.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah. Thinking of that being it's all safe now and all good, and
Yeah.
And right.
suddenly, boom, your whole life changes.
Right.
So how did you change your life? And how about your husband, a psychologist? I've got to say, I'm curious. And you're in art therapy, so you're
Yeah,
sort of in the
yeah.
same.
He's more in
Yeah.
the business world, doing, a lot of coaching and that kind of thing, but still in relatively close proximity in terms of our interests. But it was very difficult for us. We went into traditional therapy that first year, talk therapy, because that's what we knew.
Yeah.
Even myself as an art therapist,
Yeah.
it's
Then you go to the professionals to help
you would
and
think,
you're
well,
like,
Sharon,
guess what? I have to live through. Nobody's going to make this better.
right? Why didn't I gravitate towards making art? But I didn't for a whole year.
Did it help at all, the talk therapy, or no?
Up to a certain point, there was only so much that you could talk about.
Yeah.
And it in your case, it was the accident. In my case, it was the physical manifestation of what did her body look like. Just the idea of her falling.
Yeah.
Yes.
To actually have that physical felt sense of her falling in my body. This is very technical trauma work. And as you said, most people are not equipped to do that, the trauma work and the grief and bereavement work. So we got to a point, but it's the unspeakable things that weren't being spoken of. And even in suicide bereavement groups, I didn't find those helpful early on. I think you can get into a place if they're not well led, then you have just a lot of trauma survivors all telling their story, and that's re-traumatizing to other people.
That's what I've heard some of my clients say.
Right.
My individual.
Right.
I'm hearing my own story, but now I'm hearing everybody else's traumatic
Right.
story.
And so my question to myself, almost at the year mark, was, what about what I'm not talking about?
Interesting, Sharon.
What do I do with that?
Yeah.
What do I do with what's it's the story that's inside your body? How do I work with that? And it was just, she died in October, so that following December, having gone through, a little bit more than a year, I stood in the kitchen and I went, oh my God, help me. If it still felt like this a year later,
Right.
like, where am I going and what am I doing? And this little voice said, well, why don't you make a collage?
Wow.
Why
I
don't
like
you-
that little voice. I had a
that
little voice
that
came
said,
to me
why,
that said, "Go
yes,
work out." So
why
yours
don't
are
you
like,
make
"Go get
a
a crew."
collage?
Yeah.
And so I listened. I listened to that little voice because I had also been in a year of meditation and working. And I think when you get so still, you begin to hear. And I followed that guidance, and I went and got art materials that were crayons,
Oh,
glue,
wow.
glue,
Powerful.
scissors, and a piece of black cardboard paper, and magazines that were sitting out, and they were her magazines.
Wow.
They
I
were
love this.
fashion magazines. They were Vogue. They were, Cosmopolitan. And in 3 hours, I had created an amazing, basically a roadmap through that touched into every major place that I would go in a very deep way. The event story, how did she die? Her falling, her body, her blood, all the things that I wasn't talking about.
Right.
A spiritual dimension. Often that is not included in the discussions that we have as survivors. And then the question that I was asking myself at that 1 year mark, who am I? All that played out in that first collage, and then over the course of years, I went really deep into all those places.
I
Yeah.
love this.
I love the idea, just getting magazines and cutting them out and just pasting.
Allowing the story to pour out of me without really much thought or much, filtering. Oh, I don't like that, that is not going to be comfortable. Like, no, this is my space. This is where I can be real and authentic and truthful and let what wants to move through me onto the page. So it was incredibly powerful. I mean, so much was released in that 3 hours that I gave myself to be with the truth of my experience. And I could sleep. I slept for the first time.
Wow, that's powerful.
And really, now when I look back on it, I realize I was I was back in my body probably for the first time and really present to myself, really present to the moment. And I think that's really important. And those are, the cornerstones of what art therapy is all about. But funny, as an art therapist, I didn't come to that until a year later.
That's interesting.
And then it became my life. It became
And I also
my
love
path.
this because anybody can do this.
Anybody
People
can
that
do
are
it.
watching right now can do it.
Anybody can sit at their kitchen table, grab some magazines, and just be willing. That's all you need. Be willing and curious and see what happens. There's no right or wrong way about creating a collage either. There's only your way. We say that all the time. And, just to look at.
Now, how about your other family members? Did your other kids get into collaging at all, or your husband? Or
No, he would look at them and go, that's really nice. And he would go upstairs. It was just, that was not his way. And, there was something very important that I realized early on, that in our marriage, he was going to find his way, and he did, through learning to play golf.
oh, he's
My
a
mother would love to hear that.
He never played golf before, but we also raised money for the foundation with a golf tournament. Well, if you don't play golf and you're having a charity golf tournament, you better learn to play golf. So he learned to play golf while I was doing artwork in the basement, and he would be out on the greens and trying to figure out how to hit that, ball straight. And we would then be able to come together because we were calm and present. But he was in nature. And, I think it's easy for couples to criticize each other
Yeah.
and to say,
Or say,
you're
why
not
don't you
doing,
do this, what
you're
I'm
not doing it
better."
right.
Yeah.
He was doing it right. He was doing it his way.
I love that you're saying that, because there's so many, I've heard so many women say he doesn't talk about it.
Right. He wasn't going to talk about it, but he also honored my journey and my path, and he never complained. What are you doing down there? 5 hours you've been down there working in the in the basement in your art studio. But that's what grounded me and centered me, and then we were able to come back as a couple and be together in the evening.
And how did the kids do? What did you see them doing?
Well, they were very young, when Kristen died, and so their journeys, were, I think when you have adult children, it's very difficult. You're not then in control of their lives and what they do. I can say that Kevin became a psychiatrist. So that speaks for itself.
That speaks volumes.
When he left University of Pennsylvania, he was on Wall Street and was 6 years in New York. And, that didn't work for him. And so he found his way to what worked.
He turned his pain into purpose.
Yeah.
Wow,
Yeah,
that's
yeah.
powerful in
It
my
is.
mind, thinking that
Yeah.
he lived in New York.
Yeah, yeah.
I mean,
Yeah, and
That's
so
something.
did Kimberly, our oldest, and she had graduated from Tisch School for the Arts, so she was working in New York when Kristen died, and she eventually left New York, went to California, got an MFA, and then came back to New York and went to culinary school, and somehow she has created this amazing life. very successful of integrating all of these passions that I feel there's a creative spark in Kim. And I think that she carries that, you know. Kristen, I think, is some part of that. But, you know, she has a wonderful life, is getting married, you know, soon. And so, you know, we're grandparents, you know, life, beautiful, happy things happen.
Has it been, I'm sure, nice having their biological grandchildren?
Yes, yeah.
So in a way, some of Kristen's DNA is in these grandchildren.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, a 7-year-old and a 5-year-old, little girl and little boy. And
It's so nice to
they're a joy.
bring in life when you've lost life.
Yeah.
I remember when my own child was born, and I was like, wow, part of my brother's DNA is in this child.
Yeah.
And we're bringing new life into our family.
Yeah, and of course, I have an art studio in my house, and so one of my joys is having introduced Caroline, you know, to art making when she was sitting in a high chair and seeing this child has something special, and they love going and making art, you know, with me.
That's
and
fun.
So it's really fun.
Now, what are you doing professionally?
So I'm associate director at Portland Institute, running the Art-Assisted Grief Therapy certification program, under Bob Niemeyer's direction. So, you know, that takes up some of my time. And
So you can find that online,
you can
Portland
find,
Institute, if you want to get a degree in art therapy.
Well, if you want to get a certification, which is very different than getting a degree in art therapy. But yes, you can find all that online. And, I teach. I have a private practice, so
Now,
I still see.
Where do you live?
In
So,
Baltimore, in Maryland.
Baltimore,
Yeah.
Maryland.
So
So
I
if
see
you're in
clients.
that area,
Yes.
you have a private practice and they
Yeah.
could work with you.
Yes,
on
and a
creating
group
art.
practice. So people come to my studio and we do collage work, we do painting, sometimes doll making, or, you know.
And I heard your work is phenomenal. I actually know
Thank
someone
you.
that's worked with you, and she said the studio is amazing, and she realized insights about herself she never ever realized,
Yeah,
which is amazing.
yeah. I mean, art making really is something that unlocks the unconscious.
You
And
also do painting, something
I do
with painting.
Yes, I did years and years of collage as a personal practice, and that's also, you know, what I offered other people. You know,
Now, talk a little bit about using that as a personal practice. Is it like a meditation? Did you have a time every day? What would you recommend to people if they want to get started? Do they need a special place?
Well, for years in my own recovery, I was trying to figure out what happened, who am I, and the spiritual aspect of my journey with Kristen. So that took years. I mean, you're exploring the depths of yourself. And it did become a practice. You know, some people go to yoga, you know,
Right.
and they find themselves there. But this was a quite amazing part of my life. And it eventually moved away from focusing on Kristen. But our life continues to live itself. We all have challenges that come up.
Right.
And so, you know, that was my way to explore my inner world, to put it out on paper, and for me to be able to see, oh, this is what's happening. Or just to work with your emotional states, you know, rather than being all crabby at Christmas time or, you know, being in a bad mood. I could let that
Right.
go on to the paper. So it did become very much of a practice. And I do think that as clinicians, we're really called to do the work. It's not a one and done, or even a 1 year and done.
Right.
I mean, how many years does it take to move
We've
through
been doing
it?
this show for 21
This
years
is your
or something.
practice.
Yeah.
This is your way through.
Yes,
Yeah.
and I play golf.
Yeah, good, right.
husband, I'm a
Yes,
golfer.
yes. So you understand, you know, the fullness
But I
of
like
that.
what you said about respecting the way people grieve.
Yes, absolutely.
And there is delayed grief. Some people don't grieve for years,
Right.
but maybe they are in their own quiet way. They
Right.
just don't.
You know, and we
You know, talk
actually
about it.
became a voice in the community, you know, raising money and raising awareness and being connected with Johns Hopkins and, you know, having speakers. And, you know, so we were very much a resource. And we did that for 20 years and
Wow.
raised close to $2 million.
Now, you did that with
That's
your
amazing.
husband?
Yeah,
Yeah.
we did the
That's
event.
phenomenal.
It's a lot to do a golf tournament.
I'm sure.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it is.
Yeah.
And I love the fact that you're outspoken about suicide and
Yes.
you're not hiding it, the
We
shame
were
and
not,
guilt.
yeah, we were not going to cover that up. We had an open casket, her body was there, and we thought,
Wow.
there is nothing that we are going to hide. How can you hide?
Well,
Right.
You know?
in doing
Yeah.
that, you're saving lives.
Yes.
And
Yeah.
That's
Kristen
what we
is
felt.
doing as much in her death as she did in her life to change
Right.
the world. Because there's people out there that are hearing this and they're like, oh,
Right.
wait a minute.
I
Okay.
very much feel that we're co-creating. You know,
Yeah.
she's right beside me,
Yeah.
you know, and, you know, this is a shared journey. And, you know, she touches into a lot of lives. And, you know, she created her whole life. And here I am doing the same, you know, the same thing that
I
she's
love
very
it.
much a part of.
So one piece of advice for somebody who's had a recent death.
Oh, to be tender with yourself. There's so many ways, you know, that you can find your way. You know, yes, I love art making, but art making, you know, may not be for you. You know, it may be a survivors group. It, you know, it may be, you know, really some very skilled talk therapy. It may be, you know, a yoga practice. There, you know, there's so many ways through, I think, to really have non-judgment about that. To find somebody that will listen, to talk your story, to really, to work hard, you know, to not be afraid.
Yep, you got to
know.
have courage.
Have
Courage to
courage,
grieve.
right? It takes a long time. It's not done.
Yeah.
You know, there's no done about it, and so
Well, different things come up at different times in your
right.
lifetime.
Yeah, in surprising ways, and so
I mean, your daughter's going to have a wedding. Her sister
Yes.
won't be there.
yes,
Yeah.
It'll be wonderful,
Yes.
but there'll also be that reminder that her
Right.
sister's not there.
and
Well,
so
how do people find you, Sharon?
they can find me at Portland Institute, you know, through that website or artfulgrief.com.
Right.
So
Well,
I have
thank
a-
you so much for being on our show today. It's so great to see you.
It is.
It's
Thanks,
great
Sharon.
to be here. Thank you.
And thanks for building awareness for this topic.
Yeah.
And we want to thank everybody for being on this show today. And we always remind you that if you've lost hope, please lean on ours until you find your own. And God bless.